Now, if we kind of think about what our end goal here, our end goal is to come up with some equation that says y equals, and we have to have in terms of two coefficients. So typically we have a function in terms of C0 and C1. So it'd be C0 something plus C1 something, right? And this is where we start plugging in values of k and try to look for some numerical pattern. But ultimately, we're going to be able to factor out the C0s and the C1s. So let's see if we can shortcut the harder part and just go, well, what if I just want to know what is the pattern for, say, C0? And so if I say C0 equals 1, so I just want to focus on all of the terms that are going to be defined in terms of C0, and I want to eliminate any term that's in terms of C sub 1. That's going to generate a pattern in terms of C sub 0, right? And so if I, again, just go in there and just evaluate k equals 1, 2, and 3, this will only give me sort of half of my solution in terms of C0. So that says then that C2 would be 0 minus 1/2, which is negative 1/2. Okay, so then if I come to that second equation and I evaluate it at a 1, I get, let's see, 1 minus 2 is negative 1 over 3. C to the 1 plus 1, which was 2, minus 1 over 1 plus 2, which is 3 again. C sub 1. And this makes our life a little bit easier. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even put a C sub 3 in there. My bad. It makes our life a little bit easier because remember, we're going off this initial condition that anything that's C sub 1 I'm going to ignore, and I want to focus more on the ones that are in terms of C sub 0. So we already know C sub 2 was negative 1/2. So if I substitute that in, I get negative 1/2 times, negative 1/3 times negative 1/2, which is positive 1/6. And see, we'll go to the next one. Hopefully we'll see a nice pretty pattern going forward. So at k equals 2, that'll give me C sub 4. 2 minus 2 is 0 over 4. C sub 3 minus 1 over 4 C sub 2. And C sub 3, well, that's 0 times C sub 3, so that's just 0. So we end up with minus 1/4 times C2, which is negative 1/2. Yikes, 1/2, which is 1/8. Okay, so we have a couple of terms that we can sort of go back and fill in. So again, this is all with respect to C sub 0. So if I do that assumption that I want to ignore C sub 1, then the pattern for that half of the equation so far that we've established is that it's 1 minus 1/2 x plus 1/6 x squared plus 1/8 x cubed plus dot dot dot. So we, at that point, we just could keep going from there. All right, so how do we get the other half of our pattern? Let's switch our assumption. Well, not switch our assumption, but let's just change. We don't want to look at any C sub 0 patterns. We want to look at C sub 1 patterns. So I'm going to change C sub 0 to equal 0, and C sub 1, I want to equal 1 there, and look at what kind of pattern that generates for us. So we have our C sub 2 equation. Ooh, you know what? I am going to copy those equations down so I have more space. All right, so now I get more space to do this. So in the C sub 1 pattern, what would my second number look like in it? So that'd be 1 minus 0 over 2. So that's just 1. And then if I evaluate it at k equals 1, I get C sub 3 equals negative 1 over 3 C sub 2 minus 1 over 3 C sub 1. And that would then be negative 1/3 times 1 minus 1/3 times C sub 1, which we said was 1. So that would be negative 2/3 for it. And then if I go to k equals 2, so that's C sub 4 equals 0 over 4 C to the C3 minus 1 over 4 C2. And the 0 part, that don't got to worry about it, so we got minus 1/4, and we said C sub 2 was 1. So, okay, so negative 1/4. And we got enough that we could sort of put that all into a giant pattern. So let me copy down the first pattern that we addressed. We said it was 1 minus a half. Let's see. All right, so let me go back up here real quick because I did make an assumption about exponents. So we said in this first one, the first term was 1, the second term was 0. So really, this x squared should be, that x should be an x squared, so my exponents are all off by 1 in our pattern. I'm going to take a second to kind of make sure you understand why my exponents were off by 1, because we said the first number should be 1, the second number should be 0, so where the x should be, that's not there. So then the third number is squared, then cubed, then fourth. Okay, so let me copy that down. So 1 minus 1/2 x squared plus 1/6 x cubed plus 1/8 x to the 4th plus ... And then our other pattern, which we said our first number in that pattern was 1. I'm sorry, the first number, so the constant was 0. So it's 0 plus 1 times x. And then we had C2 was x, was 1 again, so that'd be x squared. C3 we said was negative 2/3, so minus 2/3 x cubed minus 1/4 x to the 4th plus ... All right. A long time ago, we had initial conditions, so let's finally address those.